Once you've been like labeled and diminished and buried as a human being, how do you emerge as a person who is more complex and more, has more value than what society gave you credit for?
I do hope it is getting better in terms of how we might or how the media might treat a young woman if a story like this were happening today.
Hello, I'm Amanda Knox.
And I'm Monica Lewinsky.
And we are very excited to speak with THR about our new series,
The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox.
Back in 2017, I am a very different person than I am today. I am pretty much trying to keep my head underground. I've spent the majority of my adult life feeling like no one cared what I had to say, and anything I did say was always twisted against me. And then I find myself invited to go give a talk for the first time ever, and I'm utterly terrified. I also learned that someone else is going to be speaking at this event, and it happens to be the one and only Monica Lewinsky, whose Vanity Fair articles and whose TED Talks have given me hope that there might be a path forward in my life. And so I asked the organizer if I could please meet her.
I think Amanda was the highlight of that event that day, and people were I think they were just so impressed by you, which I was when we first met, and I had so much compassion for you, and it really was kind of the beginning of us knowing each other.
She made me tea. She was very anxious to know if I was taking care of myself, and gave me a real big sister experience of just checking in on me emotionally and psychologically, and giving me a lot of advice about what it means to reclaim your voice and to reclaim your narrative, and you've been guiding me ever since.
Wow.
Monica and I are similar in that there is this great desire to connect with people, but having been burned and taken advantage of for so long, there's a constant sort of terror that other people are going to take everything away from you again and view everything you do or everything you say in the worst possible light. And I think it was a huge relief, for me especially, to meet you that first time, because it was also at that moment where I just was having a glimpse into what it might mean for me to try to stand up for myself in a real way, and with the hope that they would actually see me as a human being. And I didn't know that for sure. And honestly, no one had ever walked that walk before me than you. Right. And that walk is not filled with just all the loving people, opening their arms necessarily. You really have to fight to prove your worth as a human being when you've been rendered worthless.
I know for me, it felt as if there really wasn't a roadmap. In terms of trusting people, I think for me, I've always felt really lucky that, especially our situations are really different, how we came to being public people, but I think with all the betrayal that I experienced, and I don't know if you feel that way.
I called the police to tell them that someone had broken in my home, and then I was very betrayed, so yeah.
Yeah. I think that it was, for me, I've just always considered myself lucky that I still trust. I'm still optimistic about the world and people. Maybe that's naive, I don't know. In 2021, I had read a really fantastic interview that Amanda had done in the New York Times. And in it, she talked about wanting to take her memoir and doing a film. And I reached out to Amanda to see if there was any interest, not in a film, but in a limited dramatic series. And from there, brought everybody together for breakfast, and then
babies included.
Right, exactly. Eureka was there. Now there too. And I think shortly after that, we were, as EPs, we then set out to meet with different showrunners and had this extraordinary first meeting with the creator and showrunner
KJ Steinberg.
Exactly, and it was
kismet. She really understood from the very beginning what was the intention behind the series.
This idea of a 20-year-old American kid in a foreign country, what does it mean to not have the sense of language? How do we look at this anatomy of bias? And her making that the spine of the series was just really powerful.
This series is not just a courtroom drama that ends when, Amanda Knox gets out of prison. Like, that's typically how you see these stories told. Like, this story is really anchored in the long consequences of the trauma that happened in the courtroom and how a person rebuilds their life and rebuilds their faith in humanity by taking risks. Like that there's a story of like me, Amanda, taking a big risk to have faith and trust in people again, and the benefits of that and the costs of that. And I think what was really important to both of us going in was that idea that like there is a life after trauma. There is growth after trauma. There is opportunity, and it takes a lot of courage and compassion and curiosity to get there.
It would have been so easy to just say, okay, we're going to end at the courtroom. But by seeing what happens to people when the headlines quiet down, what happens when you're sitting back with your family trying to find a way forward, trying to figure out who are you now after everything's happened and find a way forward, and what it means for people who are caught in these kinds of headline stories, what it means for their families. It's also a hope that with some of that understanding, it means that may not happen or happen as badly to the next person.
Totally.
In order to move forward, I need to go back.
Amanda did an amazing job as a producer, as an executive producer, and the subject of both bringing, her knowledge of her experiences, her creativity, her intellect, her curiosity, and flexibility. She was, we joke a lot that she was far more flexible than I was with impeachment, but, so I think that it is, from my own experiences, it is hard. It's really challenging to wear both hats of a producer and a subject. Amanda understood intuitively coming into this process. No one wanted a hagiography. Everybody wanted a story that was going to feel really compelling, to be revealing what these stories that people think they know, and then they watch a show and they come to understand something so different. So I think what was really interesting for me about being an EP on this project without having to wear the subject hat was seeing just like how many cringe moments I had of like, oh, I can't believe I did this on impeachment, or I wish I had done that differently, or I couldn't understand,
You're so hard on yourself.
Well,
I feel like you are horrifically hard on yourself, and you gotta give yourself some grace.
Thank you.
For me, I felt like I didn't have to feel so frantic because as a creator of this show and the showrunner of this show, KJ Steinberg, like she got it. When you see these, true crime tragedies portrayed so many times, they're in black and white narratives, and I really was afraid that I was going to have to push back constantly against the scandalization of it or the mustache twirling of it. And it's like, no, she got it from the very beginning that like the anatomy of bias is this true thing that we as human beings are doing our best in the world, and we're bumping into each other, and there's a perfect storm of personalities and circumstances that lead to misunderstandings and injustices. And the fact that like she got that gave me peace of mind.
She wanted to break the mold of this being a true crime drama or a biopic. And really, I think that her vision in that sense was to see you and feel you in this show.
And then support me too. Like she invited me to co-write the final episode with her. Like no one in my position is ever given that kind of respect and opportunity. And so like, I'm so lucky and I feel so supported. And like, that's one of the overall things, like shocking things about doing this whole series was, again, after like years of feeling like my life didn't matter and that I didn't matter, suddenly I'm in a room full of hundreds of people who all are doing their best work because they feel like it matters. And like it's surreal, like the shock of that. It just kept hitting me over and over again, that I felt cared about as a human being through this process in ways that I was not expecting to. So again,
I think I have to stay, Mom.
With a killer on the loose there.
I'm sure the police will protect me.
that interrogation room, that was the one that I was most concerned about getting right. Because in my advocacy work, the greatest difficulty that I have is trying to convey what it feels like to be behind a closed door and at the mercy of authority figures. And there's a deep resistance, I think, on the part of those of us who have not been in those situations to acknowledge that there is a deep traumatic interaction happening there. And, I'm very actively trying to reframe an understanding of what is happening behind closed doors in interrogation rooms. And so, there's so much at play. The dynamics of it are not as clear cut as we see on TV shows where it's just, this cartoonish interaction. It's way more complicated and nuanced than that. There were multiple people in that interrogation room with me, some of them yelling at me, some of them hitting me, others comforting me and coaxing me, others giving me, there was a lot happening, and it was happening at a moment when I was deeply emotionally vulnerable. I was very young. I didn't know what was going on. And one of the big challenges was not just wanting to convey what it's like to be coerced into implicating yourself in a crime, but to be coerced into believing that you might have witnessed a crime. There's a subtle psychological shift that happens that is deeply traumatic and is very real. And yet it's so difficult for people to understand. And so I was on the edge of my seat those 2 days of filming, watching poor Grace,
Who's unbelievable,
but just go
series.
through this
Yeah.
Psychological journey over and over and over again, never missing a beat, just amazing, just shocking, and feeling like she got it in that moment, and seeing it happen before my eyes, that was the most tense I was. And I think I was crying at the end of it all, not just from oh God, here's the worst experience of my life all over again, but also with relief that we had gotten it right. And I really feel a deep responsibility to get it right, because I'm not the only person who's ever been wrongly convicted. I'm not the only person who's ever been coerced into falsely confessing. And I feel like it's really a really important part of the series is really revealing that psychological journey.
These are the kinds of things that I think people will be surprised by when they watch it. I mean, I myself, coming into this story, I had so much compassion for Amanda, and I also realized how little I knew, how much I had gotten wrong. And
you've been interrogated too.
Exactly.
This is my life we're talking about.
È innocente, lo sai.
Per lei sono tutti innocenti.
And I think it all goes back to how does the human mind work, and how do we get things wrong, and how are we quick to judge, and how are we projecting our fears and our fantasies onto people. And I think it's really easy, especially to project our fears and fantasies onto women, because we are objects of other people's fantasies. And I think that, and because of that, there is this impulse to label us, to judge us, even amongst each other. There wasn't just men who were at the helm of my, persecution. There were a lot of, women who were invested in it as well. And I think that, I wonder, I think it's worth questioning, where is that coming from? Where is that impulse to judge and condemn and to label and to diminish a woman coming from? And one of the things that I was so troubled by in my own experience was seeing how women are pitted against each other, how we're sort of put into these dichotomies of the virtuous and the vice, and we are meant to represent these ideals instead of being allowed to be the flawed and fragile human beings that we all are, and we're not given the grace to be complicated.
in some ways, what is the worst aspect of it is that this the kind of the misogyny becomes internalized misogyny, not just for the person who is the target of this, but for all women. All women end up consuming, this media, and I think that from that we find different ways that it kind of permeates our society. It permeates the way we think about ourselves and feel about ourselves. So I do hope it is getting better in terms of how we might or how the media might treat a young woman if a story like this were happening today.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to show the afterwards, because it's like once you've been like labeled and diminished and buried as a human being, how do you emerge as a person who is more complex and more has more value than what society gave you credit for? And to stand up for yourself like that takes, not balls, something else.